But Lilo and Stitch, you realize, Pro, if it had actually gotten to your estimation and it had pulled off $1.6 billion at the box office, even if it had just tied with Inside Out 2, you realize that box office for this movie alone would have not only covered the costs of Lilo and Stitch, but it would have gotten Disney entirely out of the $600 million pooch screw that they put themselves in before this movie.
Renegade Online.
Yeah, it didn't. And on that end, I'll pull up something here in just a second here just to see, because I have not compared these side by side, but we're going to do a cold reaction here.
And while you're doing that, Valiant, I'll tell you this too. Here's something that needs to be talked about from people like us. Our channels need to be covering this. We haven't had $1 billion movie, have we?
No. And what I was about to say is that I think the narrative decisions that they made for Lilo and Stitch to update this for, quote, modern audiences, right? We need to have, we can't show Nani giving up her dreams as a strong, independent woman to care for a child, because look at what Hollywood thinks. Hollywood thinks that conservatives and Trump and all this are Handmaid's Tale slaves. I'm sorry. To some people watching out there, this sounds far-fetched and absolutely ridiculous, but I've seen too much in the last several years in Hollywood. This is how these think. And we saw some of them come out this weekend, like Mark Ruffalo, who has got to be one of the most cuck beta little bitches on planet Earth. And I love seeing the pictures of him and Chris Evans, my two gay dads kind of thing. But here's the deal. I think it cost Lilo and Stitch the top end. It cost Lilo and Stitch the ability to put a real dent in the $600 million losses that Disney has accumulated up to the point of this movie's release. With the $300 million loss on Snow White, the $200 million loss on Captain Falcon DEI, the $100+ million loss on the Thunderdolts. And we haven't even got to Fantastic Four yet, which is probably going to be another mess for him. I don't know if they'll lose $200 million on it. I think that might be one of the smaller losses that they have for the year, but I still think it's probably going to wind up being a loss. We don't have all the exact figures yet, but this is just gut instinct. But Lilo and Stitch, you realize, Pro, if it had actually gotten to your estimation, if they hadn't screwed with it, and it had pulled off $1.6 billion at the box office, basically kind of, even if it had just tied with Inside Out 2, you realize that box office for this movie alone would have not only covered the costs of Lilo and Stitch, but it would have gotten Disney entirely out of the $600 million pooch screw that they put themselves in before this movie.
Yeah, and now all of that has to be carried by Zootopia 2 and Avatar, if you're willing to count Avatar. That's what we're down to, because there is no indication that Elio is going to make any money.
No,
there is no indication.
They're going to lose they're going to lose probably $200 million on Elio. Let's go ahead and call it now.
Right.
And probably going to lose nearly $200 million on Elio.
Yeah, Fantastic Four. I mean, it's getting worse the closer we get to it. So we've seen this play out before. Now, let me just throw this to you, okay? Mm-hmm. The way that Lilo and Stitch ended, and folks, if you haven't seen it, just when you see it, you'll know. What if instead of the way they did it, I know they got to girl boss this thing. So what if instead the neighbor said, I've talked to the state and they're going to let me be, your watcher over kind of person, right? I'm going to be your new check-in, and that way you get to keep Lilo. And then David, the boyfriend who can't be boyfriend anymore, says to Nani, yeah, and I talked to the president of the local college and told him about losing your parents, and he's offered to give you a scholarship to become a marine biologist. Are you up for that, Nani? And then we get a happy ending, and they get to keep their house, and yada, yada, yada. There's a way to do it that Disney decided they didn't want to do, and then at the last minute, they threw it in a post-credit scene to be like, oh, she's got a portal gun, so she's traveling from Berkeley to visit Lilo now. She's getting in the portal. That's how they're making it work.
Yeah. It's like I said, I don't understand. It's one of these things that, and look, to be fair, as we started off the show earlier talking about the live action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, overall, I thought the movie was great. And I thought the greatness of the movie, that how much I enjoyed it, it hit all the same feels that hit me with the first one. It overshadowed some of the deficiencies with it in terms of the casting and some of the changes that they made that and this is what's so irritating, for nothing more than like this diversity virtue signaling stuff. It's just stupid. It didn't need to be done. It's a distraction. We all know why it was done. And it's just, it's dumb, right? But when you do this at the level where you radically alter character arcs and movie arcs and the underlying theme of the film, it's visually, emotionally, mentally offensive, and it just turns people off. And I can't imagine that didn't have some kind of impact on this. Even though Lilo and Stitch was a commercial success for Disney, what you have to ask yourself is, I think you mentioned the term earlier, the economic opportunity cost of what they did. How much more box office did Disney cost itself by making this inane decision, this stupid virtue signaling decision? And I think it probably cost them at least a couple of $200 or $300 million. Again, let me show you what I'm talking about here to kind of give you a bit of comparison. A movie that hit all the right notes, gave the audience exactly what it expected. Oh, but Valiant, Lilo and Stitch, it wasn't, it was a live action remake of it. No, here's the thing. What people need to understand. It's about getting what you expect. And this goes for How to Train Your Dragon too, which is why I complained about the casting of Nico Parker in the role of Astrid, because it's visually and otherwise, after seeing it, not what you expect from that character, right? Super Mario Brothers. What was the biggest compliment paid to this movie? It hit every note. It hit everything perfectly. They didn't screw with everything. They gave the audience exactly what they wanted. They didn't give a shit if people complained about, oh, it's fan service. No, it doesn't. No, they gave the audience exactly what they were looking for, and the audiences hooped and hollered. We went back to see it 2 and 3 times, right? Look at the chart. Super Mario Brothers, right? At the same point in time, you see here, that, let me get over here. Here we go. Right here. I want to go to day 10. Day 10, Lilo and Stitch and Super Mario Brothers were basically neck and neck.
Yep.
But by that point, the audiences had started making up their minds that this wasn't what we expect. Right? They were excited right out of the gate to go see it. Look here. Look here on day 4, basically neck and neck. And then right here, look at day 7, 217 versus 224. The fallout started to happen, but then you got the second week and it caught back up. But now look at the line. Look at the line here on day 24 for Lilo and Stitch, 366. Day 24 for Super Mario Brothers, 458. That's a world apart, man. 366 to 458. That's a lot. That means Super Mario Brothers is 30%, 33% or so ahead of where Lilo and Stitch is at the same time in its run. This is why I'm telling you this thing doesn't work. And we're still not 100% sure on the budget for Lilo and Stitch because, again, this was originally intended for Disney Plus.
Yep.
It shifted to the theatrical. They did the same damn thing with Moana just a few months ago. Take it with a grain of salt, but we're being generous to this one. But you look here, look at the international box office. Lilo and Stitch, 459. Mario, 784. Kids, the international box office is going to be nowhere close. The international box office is going to finish up for Lilo and Stitch nearly $300 million behind Super Mario, okay? The domestic box office is going to finish $250 million-ish, probably behind or more Super Mario. Again, both of these were big popular movies. They were IPs that people knew. They were familiar with it. You really didn't have to sell what it was because it was already a known quantity. And it didn't really hit, right? It didn't hit the way it should have. And again, we can make comparisons to Sonic and everything else. And I know Sonic didn't do as well. And I get all that. What I'm trying to find, though, were two movies hitting the same type of broad 4-quadrant demo group that opened relatively in range with one another. I'll make it even worse. Super Mario opened in 2023. If we actually adjusted the box office in Mario up for inflation since 23, which would be at least 10%, okay, it gets even worse for Lilo and Stitch. But that line right there, that red line where it was neck and neck, but by 10 days in, this is the difference. This is key. People kept going back to go see Mario again and again and again and again because it delivered exactly what audiences expected, and they were thrilled. Lilo, they changed it. They changed the premise, at least in terms of the arc, and you're seeing that roll off. This is where, right here, day 10, this is where the repeat audiences, in theory, if they're going to show up, they should really start showing up.
And we're close to a flat line now. That's where this is going to go next. This red line is about to do the flat line that didn't happen until about, day 50 for the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.